There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Remember the drumbeat, war in Iraq, we've got to invade, we've got to invade. Remember the yellow cake, thank you, in Niger.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
Iraq has sent agents to Niger, and they are buying yellow cake, which is used in nuclear bombs, so that, as Condoleezza Rice put it memorably, we cannot wait for the smoking gun to come in the form of a mushroom cloud. This scared me. Did it scare you? No? Well, you're smarter than I am. But this was completely fake. And up and down, we now know, up and down the State Department, people were like, fake, fake, don't do it, don't do it. But they hyped this threat.
This government does not torture people.
We don't torture people. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, we don't torture people. Waterboarding, we do not. I don't talk about techniques, and we don't torture people. Now listen to me. I want you to listen to me.
The second thing that always happens in a closing society is to create a secret prison system outside the rule of law where torture takes place. And by secret, I mean unaccountable. Now, the White House has said for years, America doesn't torture. We know now that America tortures grievously. But now we know categorically that the torture was directed from the top, everything from directives to hang prisoners by their hands from the ceiling, electrodes on genitals, threats against family members, extremes of heat and cold, forced nakedness. These are tactics taken right from the Gulag. And we know there are black sites around the world where people are simply disappeared. The secret prisons and Guantanamo became settings where U.S. agents tortured prisoners. The administration defended torture as being necessary to save American lives.
I wake up on November 14th, 2001, and I read in the Times that the president has issued what's called Military Order Number 1. And it is an order of the president's that he issues as the commander-in-chief, essentially says that the president can pick up any non-citizen anywhere in the world who the president thinks might be involved in terrorism.
The hunt is on.
They're enemy combatants and terrorists who are being detained for acts of war against our country. And that is why different rules have to apply.
When people are unpopular, vilified, painted as devils, that's when rights get swept aside.
So the administration sought to redefine torture. John Yoo wrote a memo in 2002 that was a semantics game, a really evil semantics game that sought to redefine torture narrowly to just two criteria. One was organ failure, and the other was that severe pain and suffering must be inflicted with specific intent. And anything less than that did not, according to this memo, constitute torture.
Okay, look, you contributed to the writing of the 2002 memo, is that right?
Yes, sir.
The memo was implemented at some point, is that right?
What do you mean by implemented, sir?
What I mean by implemented is the guidance that was set forth in that legal memorandum was followed and put into action. Do you understand what I mean by implemented now, sir?
So you're asking me, was the memo followed? Was the memo followed by...
I'm not going to get into semantical games with you in this 5 minutes. I need you to answer the question or refuse to.
The Army had for decades a manual on interrogation. It approved 16 methods of interrogation. Rumsfeld then directed to expand the 16 methods of interrogation to 35, and that started our downfall.
I don't see people kind of bringing the nation to a halt in protest against what's being done to these detainees. And even decent people say that they can't get that worked up about it. I mean, these people are represented as the worst of the worst. So quite apart from the morality, of the torture of prisoners in our custody, quite apart from the fact that the Constitution forbids cruel and unusual punishment, quite apart from the fact that it's against the law, U.S. law as well as international law. So why should we care that brown people with Muslim names are being tortured? We should care for our own sakes because of the record of history. When you look at Germany, you see this clear pattern. In 1930, 31, 32, torture was still illegal in Germany, but the SA, these informal paramilitary groups, would drag people out of halls like this one, if they asked a confrontational question, and take them to these makeshift torture cellars.
And one of the early parts of the Hitler regime was really to pick up people and put them into essentially concentration camps. And instead of calling that torture, which is what was going on, they called what they did to people enhanced interrogation techniques. That term is precisely the term that the United States government uses about the way it treats people at U.S. detention camps.
After the great wars of recent history, America established laws that protected the right of prisoners more and more securely. While Rumsfeld was pushing for these abusive interrogation methods for the military to use, the military felt honor-bound, and they were actually legally bound to obey the Geneva Conventions. And under the Geneva Conventions, torture can be used under absolutely no circumstances whatsoever.
If you look at it pragmatically, does torture work? Does it do what you want to do, which is to save innocent life? And the answer is no, it doesn't. Waterboarding is the same thing that Saddam Hussein did when he was head of Iraq. It basically didn't work, and it was illegal, and worse, it provided information that was completely wrong.
You know, even the justification for invading Iraq, for killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, was based on a lie. It was based on a false confession obtained through torture. We use it as a justification to topple a regime, to invade a country, to kill hundreds of thousands of people.
This is not the last war that America is going to fight. What we do today is creating a precedent for how American prisoners of war who are not yet born will be treated in the future.
In 2006, Congress passed the appalling Military Commissions Act, which stripped detainees of many rights to a trial and allowed many kinds of brutality.
It expands the definition of an enemy combatant and gives the president the power to detain them indefinitely.
When Congress passed the Military Commissions Act, it was really a slap in the face of the founders, because they fought for any accused to have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury.
This bill spells out specific, recognizable offenses that would be considered crimes in the handling of detainees.
So what the Military Commissions Act does is, in a stroke, it strips the detainees of the right to challenge their own detention and treatment, or even see the evidence against them.
If that person is going to be tried, they're not going to be tried in front of a regular court like we're familiar with, but in front of a special court called the Military Commission. It can be done in secrecy, evidence from torture can be used, at a death penalty. Essentially, a person could be tried and executed without anybody in this country knowing about him, and the whole thing could happen in an aircraft carrier.
The military tribunals are kangaroo courts, modeled after Stalin's show trials and Hitler's people's courts, where similarly the accused couldn't hear the evidence against them. In an open society of due process, right? That means that they have to be able to accuse you of something that you've done. In a closed society, your innocence doesn't protect you. Most chillingly, the Military Commissions Act expanded the definition of
enemy combatant to include any innocent U.S. citizen